The relation of social praxis and art, always variable, may well have changed radically once again over the last 40 or 50 years. During World War I and prior to Stalin, artistic and politically advanced thought went in tandem. Whoever came of age in those years took art to be what in no way historically it had been, a priori politically, on the left. Since the Zhdanovs and Ulbrichts have not only enchained the force of artistic production with the dictate of socialist realism, but actually broken it. Socially, the aesthetic aggression for which they are responsible is transparent as a petty bourgeois fixation. By comparison, during the decades after the Second War, with the world divided into two political blocs, the ruling interests in the West have signed a revocable peace with radical art. Abstract painting is subsidized by heavy German industry, and in France, de Gaulle's Minister of Culture is André Malraux. Avant-garde doctrines, if their opposition to communis opinio is grasped with sufficient abstractness and if they remain to some degree moderate, are sometimes susceptible to elitist reinterpretation, as has been the case with Pound and Eliot. Benjamin already noted the fascist penchant in futurism, which can be traced back to peripheral aspects of Baudelaire's modernism. All the same, when Benjamin in his later work distanced himself from the aesthetic avant-garde at those points where it failed to toe the Communist Party line, Brecht's hatred of twee intellectuals may have well played a part. The elitist isolation of advanced art is less its doing than society's. The unconscious standards of the masses are the same as those necessary to the preservation of the relations in which the masses are integrated, and the pressure of heteronymous life makes distraction compulsory, thus prohibiting the concentration of a strong ego that is requisite to the experience of the non-stereotypical. This breeds resentment, the resentment of the masses towards what is denied them by the education thus reserved for the privileged, ever since Strindberg and Schoenberg, resentment of the aesthetically progressive toward the masses. The yawning schism between their aesthetic trouvaille and a political posture that is manifest in the content, inhalt, and intention of works, significantly damages artistic consistency. The social interpretation of older literature in terms of its political content, inhalt, is of uncertain value. The interpretation of Greek myths, such as Vico's interpretation of that of Cadmus, was ingenious. Yet the reduction of Shakespeare's plays to the idea of class struggle, as Brecht meant to do, goes too far and misses what is essential, except in those dramas where class struggle is clearly a theme. This is not to claim that what is essential is indifferent to society and in human terms, timeless. That is drivel. Rather, the social element is mediated by the objective formal posture of the plays, what Lukács called their perspective. What is social in Shakespeare is categories such as those of the individual and passion, traits such as Caliban's bourgeois concreteness and the corrupt Venetian merchants, the conception of a semi-matriarchal world in Macbeth and King Lear, the complete disgust for power in Antony and Cleopatra, as well as Prospero's gesture of resignation. By contrast, the conflicts of patricians and plebeians drawn from Roman history are merely cultural goods. In Shakespeare, the more literally the Marxist thesis is held that all history is that of class struggle, the more dubious it appears. Class struggle objectively presupposes a high level of social integration and differentiation, and subjectively it requires class consciousness, which first developed rudimentarily in bourgeois society. It is nothing new to note that class itself, the social subsumption of atoms to a general concept that expresses their constitutive as well as heterogeneous relations, is structurally a bourgeois reality. Social antagonisms are as old as the hills. Only desultorily did they become class struggles, where market economies related to bourgeois society began to take shape. For this reason, the interpretation of everything historical as class struggle has a slightly anachronistic air, just as the model of all Marxist constructions and extrapolations was that of liberal entrepreneurial capitalism. True, social antagonisms shimmer through Shakespeare's plays at every point, yet they are manifest in individuals and are collective only in crowd scenes that follow topoi, such as that of the suggestibility of moms. From a social perspective, it is at least evident that Shakespeare could not have been Bacon. That early bourgeois dialectical dramatist beheld the Theatrum Mundi not from the perspective of progress, but from the victims of progress. Severing this ensnarement through social as well as aesthetic maturation is made prohibitively difficult by the social structure. If in art formal characteristics are not facilely interpretable in political terms, everything formal in art nevertheless has substantive implications and they extend into politics. The liberation of form, which genuinely new art desires, holds enciphered within it all the liberation of society. For form, the social nexus of everything particular, represents the social relation in the artwork. This is why liberated form is anathema to the status quo. This is confirmed by psychoanalysis. It holds that all art, the negation of the reality principle, protests against the image of the father and is to this extent revolutionary. This objectively implies the political participation of the unpolitical. So long as social imbrication was not yet so agglomerated that form itself became subversive protest, the relation of artworks to existing social reality was less contentious. Without altogether surrendering to this reality, art was able to appropriate social elements without any great to-do, to continue clearly to resemble society, and to communicate with it. Today, the socially crucial aspect of artworks has become opposition to empirical reality, as such, because the latter has become its own self-duplicating ideology, the quintessence of domination. Whether art in turn becomes socially irrelevant, empty play and decoration of social bustle, depends on the extent to which its constructions and montages are simultaneously demontages, destroying while receiving the elements of reality and shaping them freely as something other. The unity of art's aesthetic and social criteria is constituted by whether, in transcending empirical reality, it succeeds at concretizing its relation to what it has transcended. In doing so, it gains a sort of prerogative. Without letting itself be put upon by political activists to provide the messages that suit them, art would then harbor no doubt as to what it is after. Fearless of any contradiction, Picasso and Sartre opted for a politics that disdained what they stood for aesthetically, and only put up with them to the extent that their names had propaganda value. Their attitude is impressive because they do not subjectively dissolve the contradiction, which has an objective justification, by the univocal commitment to one thesis or its opposite. The critique of their attitude is pertinent only as only one of the politics for which they vote. The smug assertion that they only hurt themselves misses the point. Hardly last among the aporia of the age is that note that holds true, that does not do damage to the interest, even the objective interest, of those who foster it.